Okay, documentation, so making sure that we have all the sellers, or that we have the real sellers and selling homes. What a crazy thought.
Class on the 15th, October 15th here.
Yeah, we'll probably change that just because of that 3-hour class. So just heads up on that. Yes, Rob.
So, and I'm not being critical, but I mean, I've gotten a few leads from Command, and almost all of them want to end up doing something on WhatsApp, where they never meet me, and I never can really track down their identity of who they are. And
Talking to somebody.
sorry, it's harder to track down the identity of who this person is. But a lot of them, I mean, in foreign countries, they do use WhatsApp more than they do here in America. But it's one of those things where a lot of them do some scams and they're hiding things, and they only want to talk on WhatsApp and stuff like that, not on a real phone line.
Yeah, I would say in this marketplace, my guess is that if somebody's only willing to talk with you via WhatsApp, probably a huge red flag. That's here. Certainly folks overseas. I have a daughter living in Guam right now. We only talk over WhatsApp and doing video calls and voice calls because that's their best tool to do it. We're not in Guam. We're not overseas. And so if they don't have a real number, say, great, call me from a landline. Because you want to make sure it's real. So let me show you some of the things that I've noticed, and Stacy talked about it. The proper documentation is one thing. I love telling stories because I hope it emphasizes some stuff. We had an agent I was working with here. He has, and ironically, it's a divorced couple. They went through all the challenges. The estranged wife, or now the ex-wife, refinanced the property. So she's the only person on title, only one on the loan. The divorce decree, though, says that she has to sell the property, has to sell the asset. Took over a year, never did, so the ex-husband went to court. She decided not to show up. He got the summary judgment, which means it went to him. He got all authority to sell the house. He's not on title, he's not on the loan. So we have now these conflicts, and then she went and listed it with someone, and he says, yeah, not good enough. And so it's really hard, but the documentation is such. We have a court order, my listing agent has that, it says this is how we're going to sell the property. The seller's not willing to talk to the listing agent, or the wife isn't willing to talk to the listing agent. How do you handle that? Maybe a good thing is fight or flight. Okay, run away from these. Although not really, you want to have those conversations. But I had a great conversation with the other broker. Now that ended up with brokers having to get involved, and at this point we're still going down the path. The other agent hasn't done a poor job, just hasn't gotten any showings, which probably tells me there's an outside chance the price may not be right. For a fast close. The other problem, and agents do this and we don't think about it. Well, the agent put $2,500 into the house to make it saleable, so that she could sell it. She replaced the flooring, she did stuff, and spent $2,500 of that money. And there's no documentation on that. You've got to make sure you're careful. That's what you do. So anyway, just watch out. So let me ask some other questions. What's the danger of not staying in your lane or doing research on behalf of your clients? I've seen this. In other words, I talked to the county and they said that they could do this with their land. Or I talked to the city planner or the community development department, told my seller this is what they could do. What problems might come up? Go ahead, Rob, you got the mic.
Well, the city and the planners can say whatever they want, and you can't hold them accountable.
Yeah.
So basically, what happens is you're the one that told the client. You're better off having the client go in and talk to the city to get their opinion directly from them if they want the city's opinion.
Yeah. So the real issue is, and I'm going to say it easy, try to be kind. Quit being the source. Don't be the source of all knowledge. All that. Go ahead, Sheila over here.
It's one of the most frustrating things as a lender when you're working with an agent when they try to play lender. I had a client that we set this whole structure up and they were getting all of this money back to cover a buy down and closing costs, and the lender called me and he said, the agent called me and he's like, you can't do that. That's more than 3% concession. And I told them you can't do that. And I'm like, oh, well, they happen to be putting 20% down, so we're fine. And he's like, oh, backtracking. Oh, I usually work with first-time homebuyers. Like, just stay in your freaking lane. Trust
Wow,
me.
was that pretty clear? What Stacy?
Tell us what you
What
really
Sheila
feel.
said. Okay,
It wasn't an agent here, though.
I'm so not surprised that it was not an agent here. Okay,
It was not.
but veering outside of your lane is super tempting. Let me share with you one last story, because I think, again, stories help illustrate it. A guy was working with a buyer to buy a property in Spring Lake area, which is is that south of Payson? Spring Lakes? Is it lakes or lake? I can't remember now. All of a sudden. My mind. Say it again.
Spring Lake.
Spring Lake, okay. It was an 1.5-acre property, really cool, and he called the county said, oh yeah, they could build another house on this property. The listing agent said, yeah, they could build another house on the property. And I said, agent, that's really cute, but I need your buyer to call the county. Why did I talk to a different person in the county and said, oh no, one structure, there's an existing structure already, can't do it. Can you imagine what would have happened had the buyer purchased this property with a house on it, and you can't build his dream house or subdivide that piece of property? Stinks to be you if you're the agent, and it stinks to be the broker of that agent, because they have to sue the broker, and I don't want to be sued. I'm crazy that way. But I hope that helps you understand. Stay in your lane. Say, oh, I've had people. I've talked to the planners. I've talked to these guys. They say that's great. Planners don't make decisions. City councils do when it comes to variances. Don't get out there. And I had an agent yesterday contact me. I'm representing a buyer, and they want me to go to the council. They want me to do all of the subdividing and everything else on this for them. And I was like, oh no, you stay in your lane. I hope that helps. Stacy.
I just wanted to add to that, about staying in your lane. I just recently had,
recently had a transaction where the agent was helping a client look for a home, and they found the perfect home. And the client wanted to put a pool in, and the agent was like, "Oh yes, you can certainly do that. I've already called the city, the planning and zoning, and you're good. Everything was great." Well, when they got to closing and we started talking about it, I had pulled up that where they were looking, the water table is too high in Alpine, so they actually could not purchase the property. And they didn't want to purchase the property based off of that information, but they were going to sue the agent because the agent had gone and did all of the
Please tell me it wasn't my agent.
research on it with the county. And so it is really important to make sure that they do their own due diligence. You're just to advise them to do their due diligence. They're responsible for all of that information because it will come back on you at the end of the day.
Ouch.
We have a
KW
disclosure
agent?
for that, don't
Oh, thank you.
we? We have a disclosure for that.
Yeah, we have that buyer due diligence, Janet, in the back of the
so,
She's telling me to hurry.
This might help you to remember every time I want my husband to do something, he's a structural engineer, like fix my car or whatever, he tells me, you married a structural engineer, not a mechanic, not insert whatever he doesn't want to do, right? So they hired a real estate agent, not somebody to subdivide, not a lawyer to get anything else. So that's all they hired is a real estate agent.
I don't think I'd say it better myself. So I hope we've covered that. But guys, stay in your lane. We are hired to represent a buyer or a seller in a real estate transaction, not beyond that. Keep it there, okay? How long do you and I have to keep copies of our buyer broker agreements, rep Cs, and all that stuff? This is just quiz time. I heard 3 years. Anybody have a different
I
answer?
thought it was 5.
And I heard 5. 7, okay, we're getting in tax time now. Okay, correct answer, 3 plus 1. We're in 2024, so we would hold it until January 1 of 2028, which is 2027 is 3 years from now. January 1 of 2028, you can now throw those away. Now, you don't have to keep paper copies back in the day, right?
So my basement, I can clear out those documents from 20+ years ago?
Yes, you may clear your basement out from 20+ years ago, unless you did something like Dean did, because I used to copy all of my docs, burn them to DVD for every year, and I used to have DVDs for every year. Now there's this thing called the cloud. And so scan your documents. Now, how does your broker keep track of all that stuff? Command, yes. That's why you submit all your files in Command. Suppose you wrote an offer that did not get anywhere. Was never accepted. Do you have to keep a copy of that offer?
Yes.
Yes. And does your broker have to have a copy of that offer? Yes. So put it in Command. In the left margin, there's this miscellaneous documents. Every offer that gets written, you better have copies of every offer you ever wrote. If you're a listing agent, you better have copies of every offer that came in on that property. Remember 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when we had crazy time? We had 16 offers. You better have copies of all 16 of those offers, because if one of those folks come back, and I've seen it, and they sue and say, oh, I was discriminated against, and you didn't accept my offer, you didn't present my offer. And I go, what do you mean? I have a copy of it right here. You were about 8th on the list of the 10 offers that I received. We literally had that happen. If you were here, I'd have to tell the story, but Peter somebody had claimed that he was discriminatory because someone was from another country. And Peter Markle, just saying. The guy's African American and from South Africa. But isn't it interesting that came up? But because of his documentation, that HUD case was released in about 2 hours. But he lost about 3 weeks of sleep waiting for that case to come up. So you better have your documentation. That said, the Division of Real Estate is also saying that documentation, not just your contracts, but you better have copies of all of your communications. Please do not delete all of your emails. Do not delete all of your text messages between yourself and the other agents. How many people now, I know this is going to be a lot of hands, how many people here use Apple phones, iPhones? Okay, most of you. How many of you are on Android? Okay, there's a few of us. Are there ways to keep track of those messages? Yeah, for you Apple folks, it's called iMessage, right? Don't be deleting and cleaning out your iMessage folders. Keep those. Those of you that use Android phones, I would say you should start converting over to a different tool. I use Google Messages because I can now send messages from my desktop, as well as I can go back and go through all the archives. Just archive those messages you don't want to look at. But don't just let them fall off the face of the earth. But you better have those for 3 years plus 1. Have that stuff. Yeah.
Another tool you can use is Apple.
Yeah, an Apple phone? I'm not smart enough to use an iPhone, so sorry. All right, I like phones that are fast and that work and do what I want. So, cool. So, that's a good one. Okay, so what do agents get sued for? Shocking, paperwork. I talk about it all the time. We are purveyors of paperwork. But we do bless lives, and I hope that we do. But your paperwork better be good. Inaccurate listings, square footage, etc. Make sure that that whatever your source is, you better source it. Remember on your listing agreement, you say, where's the source for my square footage? And it's not because the agent measured it. Unless you're an appraiser, I have 2 appraisers on our roster, but no one else has to measure a house. Is that okay? Now we can guess and get guesstimates of it. You can use Cubicasa, which is that app you can get on your phone, and it gives you a good idea and gives you floor plans, but that's not your source. Please don't do that. Had an agent once who liked the appraisal square footage for upstairs, and he liked the county's square footage for the basement, and so we combined the 2. And we had a house that was about 600 feet bigger. It was a 3,000 foot house. It was about 600 feet bigger than that 3,000 for the house. That's a problem. The agent's no longer with us. Property conditions, 10.3. The house has to be in the same condition, broom swept and all that stuff. Remember, that's where you'll find broom swept, 10.3. But make sure it comes up. This morning, I had a phone call from the agent in the listing and in the rep sheet. It said that the seller's taking the stove and taking the fridge. There were specific exclusions on the listing. Buyer agent just called her and put a text, yeah, we're getting our attorney involved. And I just said, and she said, because you didn't do it right? Because you're the one who wrote the reps, you generated the rep sheet and all that. So I just told her, let the agent know that he has to call me or his attorney does, but you're not allowed to talk to that agent anymore. Because he decided to use the big A word. Okay. That's it. All right. And then disclosures or lack thereof. One of the biggest areas where we get sued, agents get sued, is for lack of disclosure. Because no one's going to say, oh, you over-disclosed. But it's because you didn't disclose. Huge issue for lawsuits. So you need to know your rep sheet. If I may, on the very first thing here, include the multiple listing number. Sometimes in a multiple listing, you may say, hey, we're including the trampoline. How often do you get trampoline showing up on a rep sheet? Probably never, right? But if I have on the property address, I always add a parenthetical phrase in parentheses that say MLS, whatever that number is. I just now brought the multiple listing service listing into the four corners of my rep sheet. If you will do that, that'll save you a lot of headache. The only time that trampoline would be excluded is if it is specifically excluded by that seller later, because now it's included. Does that make sense? Make sure you do that. Now the beautiful thing is ask for your commission. You better know how to use it in your rep sheet. I'm encouraging you guys to treat every home like a FSBO. Ask for your commission. Make sure that whatever you're asking on the rep sheet is not more than what you have in your buyer broker agreement. Right now, there's not a way to account for that, or there's nobody monitoring that. Go ahead, ask a question. Usually, ask.
I was just gonna clarify, so if you ask for on the rep sheet, you don't have to ask for the BBA. You don't send both.
No, I don't think you need to send the BBA.
Well,
Some people say
sorry,
you have
not
to.
the BBA, the buyer,
Oh,
or the,
the compensation agreement.
yes, thank you.
Yeah, no, I would actually I'm just saying, I would shy away from that agreement unless you need it. But I would use the commission, the seller pays the commission agreement. If you're doing a land deal, that one's gonna require that, because there's no place on the rep sheet to do that. So I would say, we want the seller to pay commission, over and above what has been agreed upon between two brokerages. But I would just ignore the one that the listing agent sends it to you. I would ignore it and not sign it. I would ask for your commission on the rep sheet, because now I have documentation, more clearly. Okay. Anyway, notice, section 18 of your rep sheet. How many people, what is notice? What constitutes notice? I know this is basic.
Executed.
Executed what? Yeah, it's an executed document. So let's say the buyer's canceling. How do we do it? This is easy. Do you send a text over to the listing agent? Now we're out. Yeah, that doesn't do it. It's cute, but it doesn't work. And I use cute, and sometimes I'm sarcastic. I know it's shocking. I had a listing agent once send over to a buyer, hey, we need you guys to settle tomorrow. This is on a Thursday. You need to settle tomorrow. If you don't, there's a per diem of $150 per day until you do settle and close. And the buyer agent had already sent over an addendum saying we'd like to extend settlement, or saying we need settlement to be a week from tomorrow, not tomorrow. Who's right? What is the notice? Yeah, what has been signed by the seller here? That would be notice of substantial completion. All we got was something from the agent who tried to say, oh, and we're gonna add additional terms. We're gonna charge you a per diem. And so I looked at the agent and said, that's really cute. Maybe next Wednesday, just say, I'm still waiting for a notice of substantial completion, but we're ready to close on Friday. Because there are no teeth. The seller can, I guess the seller could refuse to sign, but the seller doesn't get that additional $150 a day just because the agent said so in a text. Okay, does that kind of make sense? Notices are a big deal, but make sure that you get all the signatures. Make sure that whoever's giving notice signs it and should be received before a notice deadline. So if you're canceling, make sure you cancel before that deadline, if there's a deadline. If you're doing any kind of extension, make sure. Statute of frauds, you always say, oh no, there's fraud. The statute of frauds rule and law tells us that you have to meet deadlines and beat deadlines. If I'm going to accept an offer, I can't accept it after a deadline. And so I don't say, we're going to change the acceptance deadline. All we're saying is, we accept the terms and we want to go into contract. Seller will leave. Let's say the seller is accepting. The buyer will leave. We're late in signing this. We accept the terms of the contract as written, and we ask the buyer to sign to put us in the contract, if that were the case. Does that make sense? You can't accept something after a deadline. We had someone play that game with us once, and it cost the buyer $3,000 of notice because the seller accepted a deadline extension 2 hours late. So make sure that when you do send something, an extension of sorts, give the other party sufficient time to do it. Noon is not a good time tomorrow. Even though I know you want to sign quickly, give them till 5, 6, or 7 o'clock tomorrow. Or sometime before that deadline. If Friday was the deadline, you want to say, gee, it'll be 4 o'clock then. Do it before 4. Questions about that? Okay. Deadlines are really important. What is the deadline in the state of Utah? What time? 5 p.m. unless stated somewhere else in writing. Okay? Same thing with days. Days as described in a contract is what? Days from whatever triggered it. If today was the trigger date, we went under contract today, and I have 4 days to get seller disclosure information to the buyer, when do I have to get it to them? Today's the trigger date. What day, Amber? I see you counting with your fingers. I do the same thing.
Saturday.
Saturday by 5 p.m., right? Because today's the trigger date. The first day is tomorrow. Does that make sense? I typically write in my contracts, so many days from acceptance, we have a disclosure deadline. So many days from acceptance, I have my financing and appraisal deadline. Those are 2 deadlines that share the same date, but they're 2 very different deadlines.
Does Sunday count?
They do, they're days, they're calendar days. Unless stated otherwise, if you say business days, that would be different. Okay, and then what constitutes contract? This is section 23 in the REPC. I think 24 is deadline, so it has to be 23. What constitutes going under contract? Nice and loud.
Signed and accepted by all parties.
Okay, signed and accepted by all parties, is that it? Say it again, I heard it. Has to be communicated as well. So again, I've shared this before. It was a fun one. We were representing the seller. The buyer's agent had gone up, and I think it's say roughly 10 o'clock. The listing agent sends a note, and because we're not under contract, you can't get away with this with a text message. But he also sent it via email and said, we're withdrawing our counteroffer to your offer buyer. We have multiple offers, and we're looking to actually accept the other offer. But we officially withdrew the offer roughly at 10 o'clock. 11 o'clock, the buyer agent calls and says, hey, I have the signed documents. And the listing agent said, I left you a voicemail, I sent you an email, and I texted you withdrawing our counter. No, we signed at 9. Yeah, But read section 23, you may have signed it, but you didn't go under contract, and it wouldn't have until you communicated that you had a completed document. Does that make sense? That's the only time when you have to communicate it, but that's a big deal. And so there's two steps that are required to go under contract. I want to make sure you guys understand that because it helps you be more professional and helps you be better
So
at
to be
that.
clear on this, a text alone is not going to communicate that.
Actually, a text can communicate, when you're trying to go under contract, you're not under contract, a text can communicate withdrawal
Okay.
of a counteroffer.
Okay.
Okay. So that's accepted. Sorry about that. Knowing your buyer broker agreement and your ERS, though these are just, again, I know these are basic, but these are the kinds of things that get people in trouble. Let's say that you have a 3-day buyer broker agreement. You put your buyer under contract, but it's not going to close for 45 days. Do I need to update my buyer broker agreement? Amber's right. She didn't say it verbally, but she did this. Yeah, you don't have to. Because you went under contract when you had a valid buyer broker agreement. Does that make sense? Now, I know none of you are ever in this boat, but I've had agents where their license falls off the map because they expired. But they went under contract, let's say 3 or 4 days before they went into contract 3 or 4 days before their license expired. Can I pay them? I heard it, yeah, yes. And yeah, I saw some folks say no. The answer is yes. Agents earn your commission at the time of contract. And so if you decide, I'm done, I'm retiring, I am not. Okay, I'm leaving the business, but I put this thing under contract before my license expired, or before I inactivated my license even. The broker can pay your commission because you earned that commission at the time of contract. The problem is you need to be, I want you to service that thing through, so there's going to be a very expensive transaction fee. And I'm going to double it for you. I'm just pointing at you that. Does that make sense? So end date of your buyer broker agreement, asking for your commission, making sure that all principals executed. Who are the principals? Let's say there's a husband and wife. Who are the principals on a buyer broker agreement? I heard both of them, but we missed one. Who's the other one? You. How often I have seen a buyer broker agreement or listing agreement and it's not fully executed. For goodness sake. One James Rex, who's no longer in this brokerage, I finally told him, I'm not paying you a commission because you won't sign your agreements. I'm not paying you. It's amazing. All of a sudden, Chris made sure all his docs got signed. His assistant made sure they're all get done. Principals need to execute it. When does FERPTA apply? When it's your buyer or your seller? Seller only. If you represent a buyer who's a foreign national, either here with papers, without papers, with a visa or no, doesn't matter. As long as they can buy, awesome. And your lender's going to have to do some extra work to find a lender that will work with you. But that's not our problem. That's the lender's problem. Right? She just going, no, thanks. Right? And title. But the bottom line is buyers could buy. But as soon as that seller who is a foreign national wants to sell, if I picked up my grandfather who's from the Philippines, FERPTA automatically is included, unless he naturalized. Yeah.
I just wanted to add to that because the misconception is that the buyer is correct. The buyer can buy no matter what. However, you do want to let them know that when they
Turn around and sell that property, then they will be held with FERPTA tax, depending on the sales price. There's certain exceptions to that, and I can share some information about that too. You can send it out. It's really good information, but yes, we still want to make sure people do know when they are buying, when they do sell.
Yeah. And I always tell people they don't want you going back to your country until you've paid your taxes. If there's a capital gain, there's a capital loss. So you say, see that. And then who figures out cost basis? Stacey?
So it's
Yeah, but it's 50% of what?
50% of the sales price.
So it doesn't matter how much, and how much of the capital gain is, what if they sold it back even? Oh, okay,
But it also might be the sell with the purchase price, it has to be under 200,000 for the potential, 210,000. Anytime I'm living there, at least 50% of the front buyer, but I'm not going to pay.
okay.
But after that, it's 50%.
You're saying three hundred thousand when they buy it or when they sell it?
When they turn around and sell it, it's 50%.
Okay, so we're not gonna get into weeds on this, I appreciate it, but 50%, and guess what I do? Title, you guys take care of that. Okay, because as agents, I don't want to. Yes, Sheila.
Well,
What,
too,
hang on.
I just closed a couple this week that he is a permanent resident alien, but she is not. And so we want her to be a part of it in case something happens to him, right? But if we put her on title, then all this is gonna apply when they sell. So it was recommended to him that he get a trust set up so that then she can have, access to the property if
Some
something were to
protections.
happen to him.
Okay, awesome. How many of you have difficulty explaining the due on sale clause?
Explaining?
Yeah, explaining it. When does it apply? Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
When it's in your mortgage.
When it's in your mortgage, is there a mortgage that doesn't have a due on sale clause today? Unless it's private money, even now, there's a due on sale clause built into it, right? So make sure, the only time it really applies is if the buyer is, or the seller is going to convey property in a manner other than paying off the mortgage, the underlying mortgage. Okay, it could trigger that conveyance, whether it's a lease option, whether it's seller financing, under the three different paths that we can take. That's when it could trigger a due on sale clause. Due on sale is just part of the trust deed, which are really instructions to foreclose, right? If you pay, you stay. If you don't, you won't, right? Learned that from my very first escrow officer. Okay, addenda clauses. We're not going to go through all the time on this, but again, this stuff is cure for insomnia. But I promise you, they're important. Compensation clarifications. Be super cautious and be super clear on how you're going to get paid. Just because now, when I say it's becoming an issue, it's a tiny piece of your transaction, but for you, it might be kind of a big deal. So people don't like to get paid. It's okay. I have a clause. Now, the addenda clauses are available at kwwestfield.com. You hover over agent, is it agent? And then you have to log in to the important documents page. There's a doc there called addenda clauses. Please go look it up. These are ones you can copy and paste. Otherwise, I expect you to use the stuff that's on the MLS. But a couple that I put in there, if you have team members, or if you're part of a team, there's others that are going to be contacting your buyer or seller. I just like to put that in, especially if they're licensed. Right now, it's just Dean and Jeanette. I say Jeanette is my transaction coordinator. She's going to be reaching out to you. Expect to hear from her. It's such another disclosure thing. I'm getting calls from all these different people who didn't know who they are. They better identify themselves. My title company is excellent at doing that. They'll reach out and say, hey, we're the title company, we're working with Dean and Jeanette, and please jump into, what is that platform called? Qualia. The quality title experience. Okay, I have an easy exit listing agreement. Now, you'll see that on the addenda clause, what it does, it says either party may cancel this listing by doing it in writing. It doesn't count if it's under contract already. You can't get out then. And if you cancel before a certain time, I'm going to charge you a fee just because for my time and pain and suffering. I'm teasing myself that way. But what's the real reason why I did that? How long do you guys take listings for? What's your typical listing period? I heard 6 months. Longer? Maybe longer? I'm longer, generally, because all of my listings expire the 31st of December. right now, we're after July, and so it's gonna be December 31 of next year. So I take long listings. And so I let them know, I'm gonna give you that easy exhibition agreement, seller, you guys can cancel anytime. But the real reason why I did it is so that I can cancel at any time. Because there are sometimes you just don't wanna work with this with your seller because they're that stinky. And you just say, I don't wanna do it. I had one seller that ghosted me because I said, yeah, it looks like there was some fraud when you bought this house, you way overpaid for this house. And the loan that was taken out against this house, it looks like the equity's been skimmed. Because all of a sudden there's no more payments happening. This was years ago, but it was when that was happening a lot. See, and Stacy's going, yeah, because we were living that dream, weren't we? All right, so easy exit is really so that I, the agent, can get out. That's really the protection for it, and that's why I do it. There are other ones, there's extensions, and there's different processes that you may have. You'll want to draft those. If there's any questions, let me know. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to remind everyone that you do have to have an agreement to lower the purchase price. And Dean does have a addendum for that.
So anyway, I know this has been so exciting. I'm so glad you guys stayed, and I've only seen about 4 people fall asleep. This is awesome. Finally, there's some very specific addenda clauses for the buyer broker agreement. Again, clarifying how do you get compensated and how it will work. There's some language in there that will help you to make it more clear as you have the addenda clauses to your buyer broker agreement. Same thing with the listing agreement. And then, let's see. Subject to sale, that's section 2 of the REPC. If they have to sell an asset, that's usually what it is, subject to sale. We had another one though, that just came up. Buyer came in, used the subject to sale clause, but it was really because they were trying, the contingency was, they were trying to assume the loan. So the seller wanted to use the time clause to be able to sell the house to somebody else if it was taking too long for that assumption to take place. So they didn't have an asset to sell, they could actually be conventional. And they got to a fight. I got on the phone with Aaron over at Better Homes and we figured it out. Because the buyer said, oh great, I'll just take out a regular loan. And they said, no, you have to get out of the way. No, we waived our contingency. So the buyer had to be very careful. They were putting 25% down, but they had to they're walking away from the earnest money if they cancel based on financing. So anyway, fun stuff. Escalation clause, thou shalt use the one that's in the escrow instructions. Do not make up your own escalation clause. You're not that good. Okay, please use that's one that I actually got from Curtis Bullock, who's the CEO of Salt Lake Board, and he is an attorney, and so he wrote it. So use that. Otherwise, you will use the UAR clauses that are in the addenda. They're separate standalone addenda, or you can use the blanket addendum and just pick the ones you want and add those in there. Closing costs, disclosure of interest, etc. And if you're selling your own property, or if you're related to your buyer or seller, would you please disclose it? Oh my gosh. It's one of those things because the Division of Real Estate doesn't think like you and I do. We're reasonable and we're logical. They think you're out to cheat and steal if you're related to that client. So make sure you're super careful on that. And that's all I have. Thank you so much. Somebody here from Florida.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Dean. This is the man that helps you guys stay out of prison, so we're grateful to have him. And just a little note for a team meeting next week. So next Tuesday, make sure you're here. We have an awesome panel. The conversation is going to be around delivering excellence to your clients. So what does it look like to deliver a high-quality experience? How many of you have heard of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel? A few of you? Okay. There's a very different experience you get at the Ritz-Carlton than if you were to go down to Motel 6 down the street, right? And so I want you to think about how you are delivering